Welcome back to Dirty 20, everybody, where we discuss all things D&D and a few wobbly bits as well, as Sir Terry Pratchett used to say. Today, we're going to be talking about horror and how to inject a little bit of horror into your campaigns or your games. And we're going to take a look at one of my all-time favorite settings and the most recent pre-written adventure that they came out with in 5th edition. Let's get on with the show. Injecting horror into your games is a bit of a balancing act, but it must always start with a conversation with your players. We've discussed the importance of Session 0 here in the past, but I'm doubling down here today. Your players must be comfortable with the horror themes that you're going to be using in your campaign, and you really do need to check with them if there are any topics that are off limits. For example, some players might be absolutely fine with the big bad evil guy being cruel or sadistic to animals, but other players might genuinely not be okay with that. Tone is going to play a huge role in building tension in this type of game, whether it's through music and lighting if you're playing in person, or simply with the descriptive language that you use whilst you're describing the room that they enter or the atmosphere of the sewer that they're walking through, things like that. But don't forget, it's okay to break the tension every so often. If you checked out our previous comedy video, you'll see that a bit of comedy is going to make the dark, horrifying stuff land so much harder. Trust me on that. And you don't necessarily have to go full hog, right? There's the opportunity to add just a little bit of horror to your current campaign with a particular adventure plot or something like that. For example, I remember my players being sent on a mission to gather a special herb from some druids and in the mountains. And when they arrived in the mountains, they went into this system of caves where they thought the druids were. And this was a great opportunity to separate the party and have them experience kind of like hallucinations individually, which really kind of ramped up the tension really nicely. One thing that I did, which I now do pretty much all the time because it's nice to have that in your pocket, is I asked all the players when they were creating their characters to tell me something that their character was afraid of. And I kept it quite vague. So some players came back and talked about their fear of water. Another one came back and said, oh, it's a fear of failure. So you can keep it kind of open to interpretation so that your players kind of can guide you in one way or the other. So one of my players who said that he was afraid, that his character was afraid of failure, I showed him a future in which the city had been let down by the heroes, by the party, and essentially been destroyed. Another was afraid that he'd let down his childhood friend, and that led to his disappearance and possibly his death. So I had, a child running through the caves, laughing and kind of staying out of sight. And of course, when that character finally confronts the child, it turns out to be his childhood friend. Again, really nice kind of mining of backstory, of what the characters are afraid of. I think all of these things can give tension building and therefore that sense of horror. One word of warning though, I've seen some people advocate for using the things that your players are afraid of. For example, if you have a player who is afraid of spiders, using that in the game to kind of amp up the horror and the tension. I think that horror is something that is best experienced vicariously, whether it's through a character on screen or a character that you're playing. And so I would stay away from actual like fears and phobias that your players might have, even though it's kind of a tempting target. Now let's talk a little bit about one of my all-time favorite settings in D&D, the classic gothic horror setting of Ravenloft. Ravenloft has pretty much been my favorite setting since I started playing, when I kind of discovered this, gothic horror. I mean, I was obsessed with the Universal monster movies, the Bela Lugosi Draculas and the Boris Karloff's Frankensteins, stuff like that. And so it was just a natural thing for me to just want to play in this setting. Dracula is definitely kind of the biggest inspiration for this, and a lot of it comes down to what I believe is honestly the biggest selling point of any kind of Ravenloft associated thing, and that is Strahd von Zarovich. He is the eponymous bad guy of Ravenloft. He's the I don't want to say the person in charge, but he's certainly controlling a lot of the darker things that are going on. And honestly, the character is so nuanced and has such depth, almost to the point of being like a tragic figure, that I think it makes for a really, really excellent big bad evil guy. So, in the latest iteration of Ravenloft in Dungeons and Dragons in 5th edition, they actually came out quite early on with the pre-written adventure Curse of Strahd. So let's take a look at that now and talk a bit about it. Okay, so let's jump in and let's talk about Curse of Strahd, pre-written adventure for D&D 5e, and you can see here it says, "Unravel the mysteries of Ravenloft in this dread adventure for the world's greatest role-playing game." And there he is in all his glory, Strahd von Zarovich. But okay, so early on in the book, if we have a quick look, you get a little bit of background and history about the setting, and it's really nice that they got the original writers, Tracy and Laura Hickman, to come on board as creative consultants. So back in like the early 80s, I think it was 82, they wrote the first Ravenloft module. So it's nice that they did that. And again, early on, there's this great section called Marks of Horror, which has some really, really great advice on the topic of getting horror and setting the tone for the kind of horror that you want to include in your game. And it has elements such as the unknown, and it gives you a little breakdown and then a couple of bullet points. So for example, before a monster appears, take a moment to describe the odor that precedes it, the eerie sound it makes, or the weird shadow it casts. So again, like little bullet points to actually put into practice the use of these elements. Also foreshadowing, age. So this one's an interesting one. Barovia is the grim reflection of its undead master. Almost everything there is old and time-worn. Everywhere the adventurers go, they should be reminded of death, decay, and their own mortality. So again, a couple of bullet points. Then it talks about light and sunlight and how that is affected by, the mists of Barovia and the like. Personification. This one's kind of interesting, so let's have a read of this one. Ascribing human characteristics to an inanimate thing is one way to turn something ordinary into something malevolent. A groaning house, the wailing wind, grasping mud, and a squatting chest aren't just mundane things. They're characters in your story, made all the creepier thanks to their human-like traits. So again, how do you set the tone for a horror campaign or a horror one-shot? These are great suggestions. And of course, you've got details and humor, as we mentioned earlier. The idea of breaking tensions breaking the tension, and having a laugh, it makes the horror and the horrific elements that much better. Next up is Strahd with the awesome artwork and also a little bit of backstory on him. And I think that this section really highlights the importance of a good, big, bad, evil guy. With nuance and almost a sympathetic backstory. Or at the very least, a good point, if you think of Killmonger in Black Panther. Now, one of the cooler elements of this particular adventure is the Taroka Deck. And they have very kindly, in the back of a book, given you all the cards needed to print your very own or photocopy and laminate and put into sleeves, your very own Taroka Deck. Great artwork, really, really flavoursome. And not just that, but it actually plays a part in the adventure. People have come up with lots of different ways to use the deck, but if you're going to run this adventure, you have to do a reading before it all kicks off to determine a few elements of the game. So, for example, you do a reading according to how it tells you to do it. And you can use regular playing cards. They've got this little kind of side thing. So, you don't have to print them out and stuff, but, you should. You can also buy the deck as well, which is probably what I'm going to do. But essentially, there's three elements that you determine from this kind of reading. And they are Strahd's location inside of Castle Ravenloft, the placement of three important treasures that can be used against Strahd, the Tome of Strahd, the Holy Symbol of Ravenkind, and the Sun Sword. Very cool magical items. Also, the identity of a powerful ally in the fight against Strahd. So by doing the reading, you get these elements, and it's really nice to be able to, in-game, do a fortune telling for your players and then have the results be or determine these elements of the game. I think that's a really, really cool thing. In Appendix B, you have a short adventure called Death House, and this is a really nice way to introduce players to the tone of what Curse of Strahd is going to be like. You could run it as a one-shot. I think it would probably last you a few sessions, but it takes you from level 1 to level 3, and then you can jump into Strahd. But it is a very nice little adventure from what I've heard. People kind of praise it for how it works, and all in all, I think that it's a great way, again, to establish the tone of what you're going to be doing in the main Curse of Strahd game. Getting into the setting itself, Ravenloft is a demiplane connected to the Shadowfell. It's been a prison for Strahd for a long time and is therefore familiar yet very bleak and desolate. What this means in practice is that people are actually living in a gothic horror land. And so everything is just a little bit off. The people that you meet, the encounters that you have are all just a little bit strange and unusual. And I think the artwork really kind of reflects a lot of this brilliantly. You also have to be very careful in this adventure as a player. First of all, it's very deadly. And second of all, resurrection magic doesn't exactly work the way you're used to. And neither does sunlight. And if at any point you might think, oh, you know what, let's get out of here and head back to Waterdeep, to a tavern or something, the mists that surround the lands of Barovia will not allow you to. And so there's kind of no escaping this place. You have to kind of power on through. You also have the Vistani, who are a mysterious group of people who, for my money, are kind of one of the most interesting ways, probably the most interesting way to get your players into the adventure. There's a couple of suggested hooks, but the doing it through the Vistani, I think, is a lot of fun. And this honestly has, hands down, my favorite map artwork. You get this really, really cool pull-out map from the back of the book, and it is a map of Barovia. You have like a whole region map with a key for all the villages, and then you also have some kind of more specific places in Barovia to explore. And like I say, the map artwork is brilliant. I love these as asymmetric kind of 3D looking things, not useful in terms of like a battle map or anything like that, but really gives you a sense of the space and the feel of the place. Yeah, really, really nice maps. Gorgeous. Do remember though that this is a pretty deadly game, a pretty deadly adventure, and it's not going to be unusual for you to lose party members along the way, so bear that in mind. It is, to my mind though, one of the only must-play adventures out there for 5th edition, and if you're looking for a little classic horror to put in your game, this really, really might be the book for you. Obviously, honorable mention for Call of Cthulhu in terms of a game that is built around horror. And Call of Cthulhu is probably at the top of that pile. But, if you want to add some horror elements to your Dungeons and Dragons, your 5th edition game, this book is definitely worth checking out. Thank you so much for watching. It means a lot to us that you're here. Please, if you've enjoyed it, give it a like, give it a share. But also, let us know, have you had any good experiences with running kind of horror campaigns? What resources did you find were really helpful for achieving this kind of tone consistently in your game? I'm really interested. And as always, keep slaying. If you've enjoyed this content, then please smash that like button, subscribe, share this around online, and come and visit our website, www.lavictoriaproductions.com, to see all our past episodes, as well as our blog posts and all the stuff that we're currently working on at La Victoria Productions. Why not reach out to us and tell us what you think of our videos? You can reach us on Twitter. @MouthLaVictoria is our producer. We are also on Instagram. I am Enano LVP, and our producer is Jazzy J Cherot. We're also La Victoria Productions on Facebook and LinkedIn. Come on by and let us know what you think.